So I think recording has started.
Yeah.
And Madam, welcome. And I am personally very much grateful to you. You agreed to speak to us despite this is just an informal invitation. In the very beginning, I'm just, saying it that I am doing all these things for academic purpose and for the benefits of my students only, and to give a test of academics to our student so that they will know, they will understand the academics, and they will take the responsibility when they will grow, and because in all the time we will not be there. So right now I am requesting our department MPhil scholar Vishwanath Sahu to introduce the speaker. I was supposed to introduce the speaker, but I thought if this chance will go to the student, I think it will be like a training to them so that they will learn. So Vishwanath, you please carry on.
Namaste. A very good evening to all. So today it's our great privilege and honor to have a speaker who is a distinguished and distinguished and renowned professor of Hyderabad Central University. She is not only a great academician but also a great social activist. She is popularly known of her books Maoist in Andhra Pradesh, which is a great contribution in the field of Maoism. She is known for her pioneering work, child rights, and she also extensively work in the field of child labor, juvenile justice, right to education, and many more. Apart from this, she is the founder cum secretary of MBA Foundation, Andhra Pradesh, and ma'am have received recipient of many more. She also act as a chairman of National Commission for Child Rights, and currently, ma'am serving as the chairperson of uh, Council for Social Development. She is the recipient of many prestigious awards like Padma Shri, Ramon Magsaysay Award, then Albert Shankar International Award, and Golden Feather Award. Just despite this highest positions, ma'am, we are thankful to you that you agree on our Mr. Sir uh, um, request, and it's your greatness that young scholar like us learn the greatness from you, and we are thankful to you. And now over to Mr. Sir.
So thank you, Vishwanath. Madam has agreed to speak on, child's right. It is her specialization, and it's something great for us that when a specialized speaks on his or her specialization. So the title of today's talk is Myths and Reality on Child's Right, Common Sense, Law and Policies. So I have not asked anything to Madam that what you will speak. You just give us a brief idea so that it will help us to introduce the topic. I am not the expert on child's right, but certainly I have searched in the Google, and whatever I found, I will just speak as the introduction to this topic. If I will do anything wrong or any mistake I commit, I think Madam is the specialist. She will correct me. So there are nearly 472 million, that data may vary or change, million children in India under the age of 18 years, and representing 39% of country's total population. Out of this 39%, 29% of the country's total population belongs to the age of 0 to 6 years. This is the data in the Google actually. So out of all children, 73% lives in the rural areas, often have limited access to the fundamental needs such as nutrition, access to health care, access to education, and access to protection. So no doubt it is clear that in India, promoting children's right is a government's priority that is enshrined within the Constitution and is protected by the legislations. Despite this, children in India continue to face challenges in attaining these rights. So, rights are there, but practically that those rights are not being enjoyed by the children, particularly those related to education, forced labor, and child marriage. So, despite the existence of this legislation, or despite it is mentioned in the constitution, so there is exploitation in education, exploitation, forced labor. I mean, children are doing the forced labor, and children are also facing the child marriage problem. So along with it, there is also child abuses in many forms, such as physical, emotional, sexual, and other kinds of exploitation. Since Madam will speak on reality and myth of child right, I hope that she will speak on what is the reality and myth of physical exploitation, what is the reality and myth of emotional exploitation and sexual exploitation, what is the reality and myth of child's education, what is the reality and myth of forced laborer, what is the reality and myth of child's marriage. So, since Madam is the expert, she will bring some clarity on this issue, and uh, in addition, this child right is also an important aspect of research in political science. So I hope that her talk will inspire our scholars to work on child's right. So thank you, madam. Welcome you once again. We are eagerly waiting you to listen you. Madam, please carry on.
Thank you. Thank you, Himanshu, for this opportunity to meet your young scholars. I also thank Vishwanath Sahu for introducing me to all your students. And I think this is a good occasion for me also to put my thoughts together and talk to all of you. Now, what I wanted to say, I think Dr. Himanshu has summarized so well. That was part of my first 10 minutes of what I wanted to say. So I will not repeat that. But let me talk, first of all, I thought, let me define certain terms that are important to understand when you're talking about children. One of that is, what is a child right? The other is, what is child protection? The other is, what is child poverty? And what does justice mean for children? And then we go into the specific aspect of myth and reality about child labor, which is what I would like to talk about, and also about child violence and sexual abuse. These are the issues I would like to cover when I'm going to talk to you. Maybe I'll take about 40 minutes to cover these issues when I'm talking to you. Now, first of all, under the International UN Convention of Child Rights, and also an agreement and a consensus world over, and also the Constitution of India, a child is a person who is 18 years of age. So, a definition of a child is all those persons who are under 18 years of age, which is, I think, a very neat and comprehensive definition. Here, I would like to mention that when we say all children are those under 18 years, and as you know, just now Himanshu had talked about some 472 million children in the country are below 18 years, whether all age groups are equally important or whether some age groups are more important than the others. I would like you to think about it. You know, whether we think that we will have to prioritize young children, infants in the 0 to 2 years age group or in the 0 to 6 years age group. As you've seen, again, Dr. Himanshu has talked about 29% of children are in the 0 to 6 years age group. Several NGOs, several scholars, they think that 0 to 6 years is a foundational year that you will have to sort of invest in them in early child care and protection, and therefore 0 to 6 is very, very important and should require to be prioritized. There are others who think 6 to 14 is very, very important. You know that this is a time when children are growing, they are playing, there's a lot of socialization that happens in the 6 to 14 years. This is a period when they will enjoy friendships, peer groups, and everything that is required for them to build their capacities, to build their functionings, to build their capabilities, just so they become adults with self esteem and confidence. So many think that 6 to 14 is a very, very important age. There are others who think perhaps 14 to 18 years is also very important. This is a year of age of adolescence, and there are many who have become experts in understanding adolescence, their mind, their growth, the volatility, the rebelliousness, the self-discovery phase, and so they think that adolescence is a very, very important phase. For those who have been working on children's rights for decades, like I have been working on children's rights, we would think that all age groups are equally important. That we cannot compartmentalize a person between 0 to 18 years and say that this aspect of your life is more important than the others. Every aspect of one's life is very important, and that all age groups are interdependent on what happened in a particular age group. Say, for example, a child who is, say, out of school and is 9 year old will pay a price when the child becomes, say, 14 to 18. So 9 year old is very, very important. Again, a child who is malnourished, who's not eaten enough in 0 to 6 years age, that would affect the learning capacity, that would affect the health of a child in the 6 to 14 years. Or say when a child is 15-year-old and gets married and she becomes pregnant, she has a baby, the baby is underfed, baby is malnourished, she is also anemic, so that also is important. So all of us believe that all age groups are equally important. This is one thing I think we will have to take into consideration. The second thing that is important is that all rights are equally important. There are no competing rights. That there are some who think perhaps right to life is more important. You have to be alive, before you even learn to have education. So there are many who prioritize right to life over every other right. There are some who are specialists in nutrition would think that nutrition is far more important to live a life with a quality of life. There are some who think education is important. Some who think protection is important. So there is a need. There is a debate on what right is more important. We believe that all rights are equally important and they are interdependent. So you cannot compartmentalize rights. Right? There are never at any time competing rights. They're always complementary rights, but rights are not completing. A right to housing is complements, say, the right to livelihood. The right to livelihood complements the right to education. So we believe that rights are always complementary and never competing. So ages are also interdependent. Rights are complementary. But what are these rights about? I think as political science students, there needs to be some clarity. And I'm sure you know what it is. You have a wonderful teacher in Himanshu. He would have told you what rights are about. But I would just kind of summarize on what one understands as a right and what are the components of a right. I would think that there are three major components of what constitutes rights. I'm not talking about children's rights alone. I'm talking about any human rights. The three, one is that a right is based on the principle of universality. That means that it must be applicable to all. There is no gradation of rights in that sense that some have more rights and some have less rights. It is based on universal principle. For example, if there is a right to education, it has to be enjoyed by all, everyone, rich, it has to be enjoyed by the poor, it has to be enjoyed by the Adivasis, it has to be enjoyed by the Dalits. So the principle of universality is intrinsic, integral to the principle of what constitutes rights. It also rests on the principle of equality. It has to be equally available to all. There can't be differentiation, there can't be distinction between one form, one about rights. In that sense, again, let me go back to education. That the kind of school in which a poor child studies should be similar to a kind of school in which the well endowed children study. The principle of equality is also intrinsic to that of the right, and if there is no equality in the provisioning of the entitlement, then it is not a right, sufficient right at all. It's not a right. So the principle of equality, the principle of universality, and with the principle of equality also comes the principle of social justice. It's part of the principle of equality. We all know that everybody is not in a position to equally enjoy the rights because they have been deprived or vulnerable in many ways. It could be a caste deprivation, it could be a gender deprivation, a regional deprivation, a language deprivation, a communal deprivation. There are so many ways of deprivation, that and economic deprivation, poverty as deprivation, that they're not able to access the entitlements. They're so deprived that they're not even in a position to eat the way they should. They're not in a position to be healthy the way they should. They're not in a position to get education the way they should. So, in a way, they are in a position of gross injustice. You know, that they're not even being able to access their rights. For them, it is so important that there is social justice and affirmative action to invest more in them, just so that they are able to enjoy their rights equally, and where the principle of universality is abided by. So there is a principle of universality, there is a principle of equality, and a subset of principle of equality is the principle of social justice. And the third aspect, which I think is very, very important, is that these rights are to be protected by the state. It's a duty of the state. It's a state obligation to provide for rights. It's not the function of civil society to provide for rights. Civil society might create conditions for the poor to access rights. Civil society and their action may create pressure on the state for provisioning of rights. But civil society has no function of protecting the rights. It is a constitutional obligation, the state obligation to protect rights. So far in history, one has not found any other institution substituting for the state to protect rights. So, rights means universality, rights means principle of equality and social justice, rights means it's a state obligation, and if all these three are adhered to, that means that a person is enjoying a right. If there is a compromise on any of these principles, it means that the right is not being actually uh, 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 that the child, a person, a right, human right is being violated. Therefore, if I have to put it in the context of child rights are entitlements applicable to every child, every day, without any discrimination. They are universal, embedded in values of equality and social justice. And the state has an obligation to protect child rights. And to summarize, all rights are equal, all age groups are equal. Child rights takes precedence over culture. This is something that is very, very important. It's a political statement that I am making in the sense that there is an argument that being a, say, a Muslim or being a Hindu, I have certain cultural rights. My tradition has to be protected. My culture has to be protected. But then, if there is a tension between tradition and culture and a children's right, where would you go? I will give you an example. When I was the chair in the commission, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, I got a complaint that this young child was being made into a monk, Jain monk, at the age of 9, and that they asked if I was not, if the child's right was not being violated. Now, what stand does one take? Would one say that it is a cultural right of this child and his tradition, his culture to become a monk? Or is it a violation of child rights that he is not enjoying equally all the rights that are applicable to all children? What is the stand one takes when there's a tension between the culture, tradition, and rights of culture and tradition and rights of the child? The stand that I took was, if there is a tension between the rights of the child and the tradition, one would go for rights of the child. And in fact, we will have to argue that we will have to create new traditions. Traditions are never static. Traditions are always dynamic. They're always in a movement. And uh, what is the tradition that you're invoking? Even the Jain tradition must not have been the same over some 2 centuries. So we will have to constantly evolve and change a tradition to suit the right, the intrinsic value of right of the child. So I took a decision and I told them that this, if there is a tension, actually it has to be resolved in favor of a child and children's rights. When that child is 18 years old, the child can take a decision on whether the child wants to be a monk or a doctor or a lawyer. One will have to invest in the child to take up the opportunity and choices the child wishes to take. But at a 9-year-old child, if you foreclose all options, it is a violation of the child's right, and the child's right to take up violation of the investments that one should make in a child's capabilities and capacities. So that was the thing. So what did it mean? It means that child rights are to provide children with full range of capabilities that they are entitled to uh, enjoy now and also to reach. So there is this argument. I mean, there was a famous poem. I can't recall it fully, about I am today. A child is today. And you do everything in the best interest of the child who is now, who is today. Don't think about the child's future. What is the child doing now? I would add to a child is today to also the fact that child is also tomorrow. I mean, child is today is important to show the urgency in which you should act for the child. The child can't remain hungry. You will have to provide for food. You can't ask a child to make up for all the loss of food 10 years later and eat the 10 years of food on one day. That cannot happen. So you will have to respect a child today. At the same time, we have to invest in the child's growing, development, capabilities, because a child has to evolve into a good adult. So, therefore, the UNCRC Child Rights Convention talks about both child's best interest as well as evolving capacities. Both are very, very important. But child rights are essentially contested. In fact, it's as much an ethical, uh, uh, you know, it's as much political as moral when we talk about children's rights and the accomplishment of children's rights. So in spite of UNCRC, in spite of constitutional obligations, they're constantly compromised in law. They're compromised in policy and programs. And this child poverty, is a consequence of politics. And I would think it is an absence of moral, ethical, and normative considerations. So, usually one looks at children's rights in terms of welfare, which is, of course, it is, but in terms of charity, let us do something good to clear yourself of the guilt that you have not harmed the child. It's not an individual feeling, emotion that you decide on whether a child is protected or not. It's a political step in whether there is enough investment on children. On any aspect of a child rights, there has to be, as I told you, state obligation. And if the state is obliged, the state has to invest. And if the state does not invest, then that becomes a site for contestation. If the child does not, if the state does not invest in ameliorating hunger, you know, of the child, then that means there is a contestation for resources on grains, contestation on resources for nutritious food. There's a contestation on resources for keeping a child healthy. And I'll come to that later. I mean, the child is in no position to demand for better food. That would become the responsibility of the adult, but I will go to that later. But compromising is an act of political decision. And a compromise is also a vacuum in ethics and morals regarding children and their rights. This can be true even of education. Schools have become the sites for contestation of power. That I will go into later. But every institution that has been meant for children are sites of contestation for its resources for children. These are sites of contestation for justice. These are sites of contestation for equality. These are sites of contestation for democracy as well. And here I would like to give only one definition of democracy, which I like, which comes from Gandhi's Antyodaya. It is true that freedom of speech, thought, expression, political rights are very, very important in terms of your election rights or political participation. But I think democracy is also reaching out to the last person, inclusion, you know, to to get them to be part of all the decision making processes. And if that has to be done, then they have to have equal say in how resources are distributed. And so you can't have, let me come back to children's institutions, that schools, Anganwadi centers, uh, shelter homes, observation homes, all these protection systems, all these are sites for contestation of resources. I will not go into the budgets, but I can tell you it is woefully negligent when you look at how the budgets have been made for children. Always, uh, where the voices of children have never become the voices of the establishment. And what are the excuses and rationalizations given for that? How does the government give an excuse for not doing anything for children? You see, you will need to also hegemonize. That is the favorite thing of Himanshu. No? He talks about hegemony and Gramsci so much. So, what kind of ideologies do you use to show that you are doing your best for children? Where everybody accepts that that is the truth. That I will get into soon. While this so in a sense, when I'm now going into the issue of child protection, Himanshu, I suppose it is going well. Yeah, uh, yeah, okay. Now
Yeah.
let me go into the issue of child protection. When there is no protection for the child, or when it is totally absent, then the poor are at a risk of being forced into child labor, child marriage, sexual exploitation, trafficking, hunger, malnutrition, poor physical and mental health, HIV and AIDS and infection, displacement, homelessness, armed conflict, and being part of marginalized communities and invisibilized in many, many ways. So, the issue of child protection is a component of children's rights. And when children are not protected, the consequences of children not being protected is what I have just talked to you about. All these children have right to protection. So what I'm talking to you is about, although all rights are equally important for all ages, I think we will have to be concerned about the rights of children who are unprotected by law and by policies, who are from the marginalized communities. And in a way, child protection is prevention of or responding to specific instances of abuse, exploitation, violence, and neglect of children. So I thought you would know the difference. Child protection is an aspect of child rights where if they are not protected, they slip and there's a violence done to them. It uh, Child protection allows children to have access to survival, rights of development and growth and participation. It keeps children from away from risk. Children in poverty are victims of severe injustice. They are not poor but are being impoverished and need protection. This is important, especially with regard to children. And in fact, I always have a problem with talking about poverty and not impoverished. When you say there is impoverishment, then you're saying that the person is not responsible for his poverty. Somebody has exploited, some system has exploited the person, and therefore it is a passive voice. They have been impoverished. Then you say by whom? By structures, by power relations, by processes, by organization, by institutions. So I would say that child poverty is an aspect of child impoverishment. And also let me go into what happens to children when they are poor. This is important because when I talk to you about child labor subsequently, the just because you're poor, children face humiliation and insults. It's a common experience of all poor children. We know it, you know it, and I know it. These are not rare incidents. They're often confronted with disrespect, isolation in both public and private spaces. In fact, some spaces are not even available to them. They are not to play in parks. They are to do it only in the night when the whole world is sleeping. They uh, on the streets, then in the police station, the way they are treated in the hostels, the ashram shalas, we know what it is, what they go through. I think there is a need to theorize on humiliation and insult a poor child faces. These are concepts, these are not just emotive considerations. How do you explain the the how the policymakers are blind to the fact of humiliation and insults? That a child in a hostel does not get the food which can be even consumed in a manner. I mean, I have seen it. I have seen in many hostels the dal is never cooked. It is liquid. There are no vegetables. There is no oil, and the rice is full of insects. Is that not humiliation? Is that not insult? What is it? So I think we will have. And so when a child say goes to a police station, if it is a poor child, how the child ear is twisted, beaten up. And there are so many cases I've come across in the last 1 month where I've been working on plight of children in Kashmir. It's untold kind of violence on children in police stations that is happening, and nobody is even talking about it. You cannot, and the current day research is such that unless you give evidence, this cannot be treated as truth. But where will one get evidence for violence on children? So if there is no evidence, it is false. Where do you get evidence for every poor child who is going on the streets who are so unseen? So somewhere I have a problem with evidence-based research when there is evidence everywhere, and yet you cannot call it evidence because you didn't do it in a format of a scientific research methodology which it should have been done. This I will go into later, but I'm just telling you now. I'm kind of rambling, but I think it is important to get to see what we are talking about. Often there are views of admiration about street children. Oh, they are so brave. They love their freedom. They are choosing what they want to do. Uh, you know, and their coping mechanisms are so good. And these children may not experience the emotion of being humiliated, stigmatized, feeling lost, or ashamed. You know, Yet this aspect, even if they have no subjective feeling of being humiliated and insulted, even if they feel that they are glorious and brave, it is unjust. So, justice is not just a subjective reality, it's an objective reality. Child poverty is an objective reality. While I did tell you about humiliation and insult, and every child goes through it, some children may not feel it, but even if you do not feel it, it is unjust. Child poverty is totally unjust. So the injustice of poverty should be determined independently of the subjective experience of it. You talk to a poor, and the poor will tell you that he is okay. And sometimes you come up with a statement saying these poor live lives, they're happier than what we are. They don't have the problems we have. That is a kind of glorification of poverty that comes up. Certainly not. It is going to be judged by the justice framework, and that the kind of injustice that the poor feel, and these are, even if they had their coping mechanisms, it's still their predicament is very, very unjust. And because of child poverty, it becomes an obstacle to equal opportunity. I talked to you about a right having an equal opportunity. So, child poverty is an obstacle to equal opportunity. And because it is an obstacle to equal opportunity, it is unjust. So the issue of justice is very important. I would say it is important when we talk about human rights and adults also, but uh, I'm just uh, uh, talk at the moment flagging the importance of justice for children. In a just society, each and every child is entitled to experience of love and care, respect and social esteem. Children are entitled to grow up and live in conditions that are non humiliating and in which they find all the sufficient opportunities to develop positive relations towards themselves and to others, especially because childhood is a sensitive phase. It is not only just that children have a right to be protected, they have to be given justice. You know, that the, Further, when we're talking about injustice, we have to highlight again a systemic injustice. That is why I talked to you about it being a political issue and a contentious issue. Child poverty is a systemic injustice within which further acts of injustice and humiliation can happen more easily. The social, economic, and political structures that allow child poverty to exist, are to be held responsible and changed. Right? So, in a way, if you have to correct and if you have to get justice for children, you will have to act at several levels, and finally, at the level of the system, of the structures and processes of authority. And of course, I would say the structures and processes which create norms, which create values that condone violence on children. That is what I'm going to come to at the moment. Finally, children growing up in poverty cannot be held responsible for their poverty. This is where I will shift to the discussion on child labor. Children do not choose to be poor. And this I learned from, oh God, our HCU student, Rohit Vemula. He, in his letter, long letter, he says he didn't choose to be born where he wanted to, which is such a profound statement. They cannot choose the families, the social and environment they're born into. They have very little possibility to alleviate their poverty, and they're dependent on support from others. Children just do not deserve the hardships of their poverty. At every step in their lives, they have grown struggling for survival without contact with the state or with the protection services. And therefore, some children are forced to be in conflict with law. They cannot be subjected to any form of legitimate punishment for actions of them because they are not the cause for their actions. Now, from here, I go to the debate on the normative structure. I will not talk so much about the social economic structures, but the normative framework under which this is where the myth comes, under which child labor is perpetuated. I will talk a bit about that, and maybe then we open up for questions. Now, I'm sure many of you also might agree, which I would not, of course, that child labor exists because of poverty. That children are working because they are poor. And that all international covenants, the covenant of the ILO on child labor, they're called 138, 182, all laws on child labor in the country have been based on the premise that child labor exists because of poverty, and in a way implying that till there is poverty, child labor will continue to exist. Okay? So, when you make a statement like that, I would like you to think through the location of the state in the life of a child when there is an assumption that children have to work because they are poor. Children have to work because they face a harsh reality. Children have to work because their families need their income. Children have to work because otherwise the family will crumble. Children have to work because they have to maintain the tradition and culture. If they are children of the potter, they have to work to maintain pottery. They have to maintain weaving community and those great skills of weaving. They have to maintain the artisanistic skills and the lovely songs that they sing. Children have to work to maintain tradition, to maintain culture. So there are so many ways in which children have to work has been documented by policymakers in their policy documents. Now, I would like you to sort of look at the implications of this for policies. Once you say children have to work, then what are you saying? That in terms of policy, you're saying that child labor has to continue. You are saying it is impractical for you to remove child labor because otherwise families will crumble. So the idea of practicality becomes overwhelmingly big when you're talking about removing child labor. But reverse it. We are not talking about the idea of practicality of the government or the state. We are talking about the practicality of the child. Is it practical for a child to be in work, for a child to be hurt, for a child to be suffering wounds, for a child to be deprived of education? Whose practicality are we talking about? I think that is a very important question that we must consider. The other thing, that they have to work because they are poor, and so many of the laws say that since you cannot remove all children from work, let us begin with children in hazardous work. Let us begin with children in worst forms of child labor, because there is an urgent need that they are not actually working. Who defines what is hazardous for children? And how do you arrive at what is hazardous to children? Here, I would like to again go back to the principle of right. If the principle of right is about principle of universality, can you divide the child into a child in hazardous work and a child in non-hazardous work, and deprive a child in non-hazardous work their right to education because they have to work, and say that let us work for children in hazardous? Where is the child right there? Is it correct to talk about children's rights by talking only about some children and not all? And in essence, also, we have found in experience that if you do not protect children, the right to protection, if you do not prevent children from getting into, if you do not work on prevention, children will perforce be in the so-called worst forms of child labor. So one will have to look at the universe of children to be able to protect even such children you think are in hazardous occupations. So in a way, the principle of universality has to be respected to come up with policies where you deal with all children and not with some. The other thing I think is very, very important is that nobody has so far decided on how poor a child must be in order not to go to school. We always say it is poverty that causes child labor. We have seen through our experience of getting some uh, 10 lakh children to school, 1 million children to school. The poorest of poor have sent their children to school. They have been able to do that. There's such an enormous demand for education. Now, when I look at the poorest of the poor and find that this person who is living on the street in Delhi, who is physically disabled, whose wife does begging, she has sent her child to school, and her daughter is studying in class 8 in a government school, then how do you decide how poor a child must be for poverty to cause child labor? So maybe it is not poverty that causes child labor. Maybe it is an argument not to supply education for children by talking about poverty. So, what one would say, it is not poverty that causes child labor, which is a mythology, but it is poverty argument that causes child labor. It is poverty argument that is so pervasive. You will find it through every parliamentarian speech in the parliament on child labor, every bureaucrat speech when he talks about child labor, every policy document of child labor, everywhere you talk about children are poor. So, in fact, the state, the authorities are giving a statement that we have tried, we've done our best, but then families are poor, they have to work. So I would say that it is not poverty, but the poverty argument that causes child labor. There is no normative framework. There is no shock and outrage in the country and in the society that children must not work. In fact, if those in authority and power, if those who are even academicians, intellectuals, if all of them say children have to work because they are poor, it certainly gets internalized by the poor themselves. So when you talk to the poor also start telling you, look, how can we send our child to school when our children are poor? They have to work. Why? Even those children who have made it in spite of poverty, in spite of their parents being bonded laborers, who have come to the university and are studying, you ask them, why is there child labor? They say it is because of poverty. And children from the poor say it is because of poverty, there is child labor, somewhere not recognizing that in spite of poor, they have made it. So one would say that the pervasive argument of the elite the elite consensus, the elite normative framework has been internalized by the poor also, who mimic what the elite want to hear. And they also say that it is because of poverty, although they're working against odds and they are able to send their children to school. And because of poverty argument, the government gets away by not investing in education. They can very easily rationalize that, look, the schools are there, poor are not sending their children to school, it is their poverty. But then, are there enough schools? Are there enough primary schools? Are there enough teachers? Are there enough middle schools? Are there enough high schools? Let me just give an example. If there are primary schools for 100 children, there are high schools only for 10 children. So it is designed to fail. You expect only 10% of children to make it to the universities. So you provide only for 10% of children. The rest don't make it. So I think you will have to question the poverty argument. In practical terms, I would like to tell you, when we withdrew from villages after villages children from work, because the poor wanted their children to go to school, because they found that the environment has changed, outraged by all sections in the village society that children are working, and they created an atmosphere for the poor to take a decision they always wanted to take. Children started going to school. And what happened when they started going to school? The wages for adult women went up 5 times. When girls were working as farm labor, they found that their wages were, say, for example, some 15 rupees a day. That is a low wage, and they were employed because they were source of cheap labor. You see, in cotton seed farms, in chili farms, in paddy farms, even now there are girls working because they come as cheap labor. But when you withdraw them from work, send them to school, there's a demand for labor. And these women, the mothers of these girls, could get 80 rupees a day. I'm talking about years ago, 3 decades ago. They got some 10 times their wage because children were no longer available in the labor market. So, in a sense, I would think child labor caused poverty and not the other way around. Even for boys who were working as bonded laborers, they would get 5 pots of dhanya as an annual contract. you know when they were withdrawn from work and went to school and replaced by adult laborers, men bargained for better wages. They didn't even have to unionize. They said, we can't work for some 5 pots of dhanya. We'll do the work, but you have to give more. So their annual contract sometimes went to 50 to 60,000 rupees a year. And then they also bargained for uh, uh, conditions of work, time. We get into work at this time, we get off the work from this time. So, in a way, again, let me tell you, because children were not working, the quality of life of the poor increased, improved tremendously. They had better conditions of work, they had better income coming into the family, and the family became a family. Even the children were not treated as laborers. Even the poor parents sometimes would treat their children who were child labor as laborers, but when they became students, it was unimaginable. The same children were given 3 sets of clothes, uniform, shoes to wear. There's a family investment in the child. So, in a way, when every child comes to school, the quality of life in the family changes. Families become families, teachers become teachers, villages become villages. There's a new tradition. Parents begin to ask questions about their girls, not about when they would get married. They would ask questions like, which college do you think we should send her to? Which scholarship do you think would be ideal for her? So the kind of questions that a family asks also change completely. So the transformatory effect of getting children off work is tremendous. So here again, let me reiterate, the mythology that poverty causes child labor has to be busted. Then you will find unleashing of productive forces. Then you will find that schools would not become sites for contestation of resources, but schools would be instruments where there is a consensus and where everybody in the society believes that on this institution there cannot be a debate. There has to be this is just one example of the mythologies of children. I think I've taken up a lot of your time. There are many other mythologies that they are, but what I'm trying to say is absence of a normative framework which is so convenient for those in power and authority. In fact, creation of a kind of arguments to justify injustice to children, I think is a cause for why children are not protected and why child rights are not protected. We will have to look at the issue of child rights from the framework of justice. And in fact, when we are doing our researches on children, if you do not have your values embedded in the framework of rights, embedded in the framework of justice, then it is a hollow research. There has to be a theoretical framework for research on children. Otherwise, it gets very, very descriptive. You will have to question why things are not happening. I'll just give you one last example and then stop. During COVID, we all know schools have closed. We all know that it has doubled the number of children in child labor. And all of us, if you look at the articles from ILO to UNICEF to scholars everywhere, they said because of loss of livelihoods, because of closure of schools, that children have gone into child labor. I would say because of lack of child protection systems, because of state ignoring children totally in the last 3 years, not making a single statement about what they can do for children, is a cause for why children have suffered the way they have during COVID. So you have to decide where we are. Put all your four fingers in the direction of the state and state inaction for where the child is at the moment. And when you say state, it includes elite. It includes bureaucratic elite. It includes political elite. It includes intellectual elites. It includes so many of them who could have a say in the way policy works. And I think one is constantly working on the ground with poor. Poor are convinced. They know what is right and wrong for them. I think we will have to work a lot more on the top, produce a lot of research. And here I might say again, even research is a site for contestation of power and resources. If you have wrong research, then the poor will not get their entitlements and what is due to them. You will have to embed your research in the framework of justice. Otherwise, don't do research. There's no need to do research if you're not contesting the status quo. It has to speak for itself. When you do research, your evidence has to speak for itself to say what is right and what is wrong. And therefore, research too has a very important role in transforming societies. Don't think that you're doing only research. You're doing something more than only research. You're transforming societies. You're much, much better than all the software engineers who may be earning a lot. They are nowhere in a transformatory location in the country's production process. It's only the academics, the social scientists, the researchers who can transform societies and play a huge role in contesting power relations. Thank you.
So thank you, madam. I mean, I think we should, since we have already recorded it, we will listen you once again because many points you have said it, and to understand all these points and to go into the philosophy part of those points is very crucial to understand what you said. While I taught, rights to my student, so I understand right in this way that I can enjoy my right only when I have power, society recognizes my right and state sanction it. These three conditions are necessary for me to enjoy my right. Now replace I with the child. Now
Hello.
child should have the power, but child is not conscious. Child don't children don't understand what is a political power, what is a cultural power, what is a social power, what is a economic power. Hence we must be double careful because child is not conscious. And secondly, society must recognize the right of the children. But then what is the society? The immediate society of the individual, including the child, is the family. Now family has to recognize the rights. So what is this recognition? Recognition means identifying the context of humiliation. And in that sense, I think there is a good movie that is Tare Jamin Par. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. So there is a good movie, Tare Jamin Par. That movie speaks volume about what a family can offer for the growth and development of a child. And there is state sanction. So overall, madam, you brought many important points. You told that how rights are complementary, not competing. And you talked about components of rights based on the principles of universality, right based on the principles of equality, right based on the principles of social justice. Then you said that how these rights, including the child's rights, are protected by the state, and how state has taken steps to protect all these rights. Then you told child's right takes precedence of the culture. I mean, first, if there is a conflict between cultural right and child's right, then up to age of 18, child rights must win over the cultural right. That's a brilliant point you brought. Then you said child's rights are contested in various sites, many sites of contestation over child's right. Then you said the context of humiliation faced by child. Then you made a very important, what I will call a important statement, that child poverty is a systemic injustice. So you argue and you hold very strongly that poverty doesn't result child labor, but poverty argument causes child labor. I think these two lines is actually very crucial so far as your talk is concerned. And in the end, I am very happy that you said the very purpose of research. The very purpose of research is to contest the status quo. It's not, it's better not to do research than doing wrong research, so that the research will, instead of becoming productive, it will just it will just work in a very opposite direction. So thank you, madam. Thank you for your enlightenment. Now I want to go back to Professor Vishnu Chaudhary. Is retired from the Berhampur University. Sir, please bring some of your understanding or insights in relation to this talk. Sir, please, over to you. Sir, you have to unmute yourself. Vishnu, sir. Vishnu, sir, can you hear me? Vishnu, sir, can you hear? Okay, he has left. Then I think, madam, there are some questions in the... Okay, Vishnu, sir is there. Vishnu, sir is there. Sir, please continue.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you very much, madam, for your very excellent presentation on child rights. You have been working in this field for decades. And though I have never discussed anything with you or never got an opportunity to meet you, I know you through my teacher, Professor J.K. Baral, who was my professor and who was my vice chancellor also. And I have also gone through many of your writings. And you have also got a foundation to perpetuate the memory of your father, that I also know. But specifically, my query would be, what are the solutions to this problem? We know that child rights are being hampered, that children are not given importance. So what are the solutions? Like you say that we need to create awareness. Long back we had a seminar in Berhampur University where late Surjakant Das, who was professor of commerce and was very thorough in whatever he will speak, he has presented a paper, and that was a good paper. He cited many international, prescriptions for fighting this. But I had the impression that no government is serious about solving these problems. And whenever problems like these are cited, they say it is because of overpopulation, it is because of poverty. For example, I was going through a PhD thesis, rights of the gone children. It was a very nice work done by a professor who is now in Jabalpur. He did it under a professor of anthropology who is the vice chancellor of KIT now, Professor Behra, and I was going through his entire research. And in his research, he has found out the health infrastructure being very weak in the tribal areas of Chhattisgarh. Then the the educational facilities are not given also to them. And another very interesting thing was when Mr. M.M. Rajendran was there, he also talked about the child rights of the tribal children. And in Odisha, we had a program undertaken by the NSS Bureau at the instance of the then Governor M.C. Bhandari, and that was given the program titled Gyana Lok. Because in Odisha, we have got, say, 23% of tribal population. And we normally say that the tribals have been suffering inside the dark jungles in Odisha, and so has their children. So the problem that was identified was the dropout rate among tribal children are more, and especially among the girl child, the problem is very acute. So the entire NSS Bureau of Berhampur University was mobilized to go to different villages or selected villages, convince the tribal people to send their children to school. Because the argument given was they drop out because of poverty. As you rightly said, poverty is an alibi. Secondly, they are not also psychologically favoring the idea of sending their children, because they think that if a child of 12, 13, 15, 16 years will work for the family, it will supplement the family's income. So why to send the children to school? That is there. So my impression is, unless there is awareness among the people, whether tribal or non-tribal, unless there is a political will on the part of the government to solve the problem of children, or to ensure, or to protect, or to defend the rights of the children, nothing will come out. The problem will perpetuate. We'll be discussing on the problems only without finding any concrete solution to the problem. That much I want to comment, because you are an expert. I am not an expert in the field, but I enjoyed your talk. And I have also prepared a paper, but I found out it was prepared 10 years back with old data, and I have quoted you when you were the chairperson of that organization. So I have quoted profusely 2-3 points that you have noted, but I am not finding out. I retired since 8 years, so everything is in a very unsystematic way. But I am in the midst of papers, magazines, and journals only. I liked your lecture. I was eager to listen to you. I thank you very much for sparing your valuable time. And Himanshu, once he decides to invite somebody, he persists and he requests 100 times. I am supposed to give a talk on introducing Odisha politics on 10th. So I am attending almost all these webinars because these days moving out is a problem for senior citizens like us. So I actually got many valuable information from your talk, and almost all the dimensions of rights of the children you mentioned. So I have nothing to comment upon. I congratulate and I also convey my regards to you. Thank you, madam.
So thank you, Vishnu sir. I think before Santa madam reacts to Vishnu sir, another professor, she is my teacher, Professor Gitanjali Das. I mean, Gitanjali madam, please.
Thank you, madam. It was a very lucidly you have pointed out about the child rights, and it was really a nice talk. I enjoyed the your talk, and for the students, it is it will be very beneficial because because you have explained everything in a very lucid style. And I just want to bring to your notice some points that I will just give you two examples. I have interviewed some women in Moyurbhanj. I am during my field study. So it so happened it came to my notice that there was a school. We know that right to education is a part of our is a fundamental right, and it is very important for to fulfill all our child rights, or to to get or to realize the child rights. Every school, every tribal village has a school. School means just one or two empty rooms. It is written and there is a board. There is hardly one teacher, and infrastructure was minimal, just one table, some tables and one chair, like this. The infrastructure was very minimal, and every day, and there was no child, because they say, who will send the children to the school? Their question, when I asked that why are you not sending your children to the school, they say every morning we go to work. Both the parents in tribal societies, all women are working either in the agricultural field or as daily laborers, or they go to the jungle to collect fuel and fodder and food also. So they depend a lot on the jungle. So they say who will send them to school? One thing. So I just couldn't reply to their query that how can we send? And if there is another small child, the elder girl child is bound to stay back to take care of that young child. So this is one aspect. And another aspect I want to draw your attention to: in Orissa, there are some ashram schools. It must have come to your notice that in these ashram schools, there is a blatant violation of girls' rights, with child rights, and they are there are many cases of sexual abuse in these ashram schools. So this is also a point of concern. This is also an area of concern for the parents. And in most of the schools, there is no toilet when the girl becomes like a grown-up child. She cannot go to the school during her menstruation, etc., because there is no girls' toilet. There is no facility for water, etc. So these are also some of the issues in Orissa, what I have observed. Another point I want to mention, Professor Chaudhary must be knowing that village. One long back, I went to Arjapalli, a village, a tribal village near Gopalpur on sea. So I asked a woman, she had 8 children. Then I asked that woman that why are you having so many children? she told me that we are a fisher. The entire village is a fisherman's village, and the more children we will have, they will supplement the household economy. I mean, they will have manpower. They will supply. They consider a child as a supply of manpower. I mean, it's a supply. So how do we address these things? And you mentioned a very nice thing. I am just analyzing this, that there is a constantly what do you the elite the you mentioned a point that there is an argument of poverty, and there is a normative argument is missing, and the pervasive argument of elite framework. I fully agree with you, and I am really pondering over this point, that that is, I just didn't give any much of emphasis on this aspect, because I'm actually not an expert on this field. So I really enjoyed, and just you can explain to me that how can we address these issues. In Orissa, there is a blatant violation of child rights everywhere you go, everywhere you see. You go to go to the street, you will find some child abuse, some form of child abuse in some form or other. Thank you, madam.
So thank you, madam. Now, Santa madam.
Gita madam.
Again.
Arjepalli is not a tribal village. It is a village of Nolias.
Nolias.
They are Telugu speaking fishermen.
Acha, they are not tribals?
Nolias
are not tribals?
No.
Okay.
They are not tribals. They are from Visakhapatnam till Baleshwar.
Yeah,
from Visakhapatnam in the south till Baleshwar sea beach. Their numbers they differ. Okay. And mostly they live in Ganjam, but you find also Nolia community in Puri. Even in Baleshwar, because they are local fishermen called Nolias. And they are Telugu speaking mostly.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you, sir and madam. So before Santa madam, you respond to these two professors, we have another person. She is also your student teaching in Jharkhand Central University, Dr. Rajashree Padhi. Now, Didi, you can bring your points onto this stuff.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, I am so eager to listen to your talk. You always say that it is poverty. We give excuse of poverty or economic factors. But I'll tell you, recently during COVID, I have been seeing it is not poverty. It is more about market. It's not poverty, ma'am. It is about market. Like nowadays, even my daughter is in the school. The school teachers, they are like more than parents or more than mother. Instead of thinking of children's life, education, they are insisting students to small children come to the school, attend education, forgetting that right to life is more important than education, ma'am. So institution, of course, has a role, ma'am, and which is missing. I just want because you were chairperson in NCPCR. I had lots of hope when you are on chair. I don't know how, because in Maharashtra also the same thing has happened. Government decided to reopen the school. In Odisha also the same thing is happening. The state government, overall governance of our country, they are not thinking for the children. They are not serious for the children and their life, ma'am. I just need your feedback, because sometimes I feel emotional that why we are so careless about the children. Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you, Didi. Now, Santa madam, it's your time to respond. You have to unmute, madam.
Sorry. Yeah, I must thank all those who have commented. Professor Vishnu Chaudhary, Professor Gitanjali, and Rajashree. And I think Professor Vishnu Chaudhary has had a long, academic experience and a pulse of Orissa. So I was glad to listen to him on this, and I believe that you need for a solution to change reality. I think is creation of, say, as he says, public awareness and also a pressure on the system to change policies and laws in favor of children. I am in total agreement of this, but I would like to add that when we talk about public awareness, the dimension of awareness among those who are rich is equally important when we are talking about children's rights, because they have no clue to what is happening to the marginalized children. And in fact, some of them even think they're doing a great favor by employing them as domestic child labor. So I would put a lot, I mean, over a period of some 3 or 4 decades of my work, I think we will have to work on the ground with the poor parents, with the community, but also amongst those who are well to do and change their attitude taking children and their rights. They just do not know, and they do not know that they're employing children because, as Rajesh said, they're a source of cheap labor, the market. So I think we'll have to create a lot of awareness and a watch on child labor. That's so important. It's a tough battle. There are vested interests in keeping children out of school and in work, but we have to keep our fight going on. Having said this, it's not that nothing has happened. In the last 1 decade, many new laws have been passed for children in a rights based framework. The script has changed completely. You have the Right to Education Act, you have the POXO, you have the NCPCR, you have the Child Marriage Act. You wouldn't believe there are at least some 10 acts that have been passed, the updating of the Juvenile Justice Act. So there have been changes. To say that nothing has happened, I think is not correct. If you say nothing has happened, we are in fact actually disrespecting all the efforts of civil society as well as some well intentioned officers and politicians to change the law. There is still hope, and we have to continue the battle for getting children their due. That is how I would look at it, because cynicism, I think, is no solution at all. We build on what we have gained and go forward. And I thought I might tell you about a program that I know. It started as 1,000 school program in Odisha, but now they're covering some 4,000 schools. A brilliant program of changing the normative framework and getting every child to school. They have declared villages after villages as child labor free zones. These are in Joda, Harichandpur, Danagadi, Sukhinda, Kionjar, Jaspur, Sundargarh, tribal areas, areas where there is a strong presence of Tata Steel. In fact, it's a program of Tata Steel that is supporting an NGO called Aspire, and I think it is gradually getting recognized. This program is also in Jharkhand, in West Singhbom district, and in deep forest there where there is a presence of left wing extremists. And I must say that in spite of poverty, they have been able to get the poorest of tribals to school. It is about 5 or 6 years old. Some of the tribal families who started sending their children to school, say, 5 years ago, now are studying in colleges. And there couldn't have been poorer children than these children in the world today. It is in there they have been, they're actually creating social transformation. I would be glad if some of you students would go there. I know it is COVID, so I can't even recommend it, but if you could, go. And there are some YouTube movies also. If you kind of type Aspire, Aspre, and Tata Steel, you will find in the Google search a lot of work in Orissa itself that is going on. I would request you to look at it to show that even today how transformation can take place, and the beautiful way in which they even used online facilities to. I am against online, I am totally against that to be substituting for schools, but how they kept the energy of community going by contacting them through WhatsApp and online. You must look at it. I mean, that's all I would request. And to Rajeshri, I think you put two, three ideas at the same time. I don't think they are interlinked. Yes, right to life is important, but at the same time, I think that education is also important. In fact, in under the Constitution of India, right to education has been an aspect of right to life and dignity. Under article, they have introduced Article 21A for and mentioned right to education as a fundamental right, and that it is a right to live a life with dignity. So again, they're complementary. There cannot be right to life without right to education, and vice versa. I mean, it requires another lecture to tell you about what the link between right to life and education is. Secondly, during COVID, I'm not sure about very young children, but I think closure of schools have created havoc for marginalized children. There are more number of children out of school and labor, and there's so much of violence on girls, sexual violence, child marriage, and again, dignity and self-esteem. Many of us, and in fact, we're part of a network which says that schools cannot be closed during COVID. When markets are open, in some states, cinema theaters are open, when everybody is going around in public without masks, there cannot be an excuse for keeping children out of schools. They have to go to schools, but maintain safety standards, and it is not difficult to maintain safety standards. If you will to do so, you can do so. So I would think that we will all have to press for opening of schools to protect children from loss of learning, from the indignity they will go through, and the huge price the country will have to pay if one whole generation of children have lost education. It's unimaginable what kind of situation we are in at the moment. In fact, due to lockdown, we are where we were in 1980s as far as schools and child labor is concerned. It's an emergency issue, and we should all press for schools to reopen with safety standards.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, madam, for responding to our faculties. Now, there are some questions in the chat box. Madam, if you can read, then you,
Yeah,
otherwise I can read for you. So,
yeah. Let me. Yeah, what I can see is from Pradeep Kumar that there is no political will. Yes, of course you can do research on this, but it's difficult to do research on all aspects. You could take up any one aspect and do. In fact, I would suggest that if you're looking at child marriage, a lot of research has to be done on the angle of patriarchy, gender discrimination, and locating child marriage in the context of uh, not just not child rights, at the same time in the framework of gender and patriarchy. It's very, very important. And as you know, that there has been a debate on extending the child marriage age to 21, which is so much against the girl, so patriarchal. I think it's so important that we conduct research. If you like, you can always get in touch with me, and we can discuss on how we can do further research on any one of these topics that you have raised. Um, and I thought I said why we failed in protecting child rights. I'll have to repeat the lecture to tell you why we failed in child. And I would peg it on normative framework. And then there is, of course, Jitendra asked, isn't intellectual silence on reluctant behavior responsible? Of course, there is. That is what I said. There is the society is so indifferent, so oblivious. In fact, if one will have to talk about child rights, one will have to look at our child same and equal as anybody else's child. Unless that happens, you cannot change reality for children. So,
Another interesting question has been asked by Babul Behra.
uh-huh,
He's asking, Madam, I have a conflictual question in my mind. Madam,
uh-huh.
could you please clarify me that if a child himself want to work because of his or her daily breads, but he or she was restricted to work because of his or her age, then how the rights of that child should be addressed or should be thought.
This I thought I touched upon subjective element where a street child might think he's enjoying freedom, or a child might think that he chooses to work. I think if you go, that is why I talked about child poverty and injustice. It's not just subjective feeling that is important on what one should do and what one should not do. A child's capacities are evolving. This child may not be conscious of the fact that his deprivation of education is not going to help him in future. So if he is saying this, then one will have to correct him in his argument and tell him that you may enjoy this now, but you cannot continue to work. Just as how we tell our children. When my daughters never wanted to go to school, the second daughter of mine cried every day. She said, I didn't want to go to school, but I knew going to school was important. I did not listen to her voice. I did not listen to her wanting her freedom not to go to school. I said, no, this is not right for a child. The child has to be in school. But the poor do not know how to say no when a child raises or a voice saying, I will not go to school. That's a cultural capital middle class has. We know how to pack a child to school. We know how to take strong stands. Children of illiterate parents do not have the culture of packing a child to school, of being firm and saying, I know this is totally incorrect. But
So,
one will have to train them in this.
so another question is asked by Niyati Avipsa. I am not getting the question, but I am reading it for you.
I can't see them.
I am helping you, madam.
Okay, okay, yeah.
She is saying that child marriage is also comes under child protection right. For thus, we would like to know about your opinion upon increasing the legal marriage age from 18 to 21. I mean, there is an increase
I
from
know.
18 to 21.
This requires another lecture, but let me tell you just two things very short. The reason the government gives age from 18 to 21 is that a girl is not economically independent. The child's education, girl needs to be educated, and the child is malnourished. If these are the three reasons, do something for these three. You don't have to get her married at 21 to attain these three. In fact, you will have, if you can't protect a child at her 18th year, you can't protect a girl at her 21st year. So invest in schools, invest in health and nutrition of a girl child, invest in her opportunities, let the child girl decide what she wants to do after she's 18. If she's old enough to vote for who should be elected, she's old enough to decide whether she should get married or not. I don't think it is correct to extend the age to 21.
So thank you, madam. Another question is asked by one of our good student of the department, that is Samir. So Samir has written a paragraph actually. Now I want directly, Samir, you directly ask this question to madam.
I can't see these questions anyway.
Okay, Samir, are you there? I think Samir is not there. Okay, let me read what he has written. Today, 80% out of school children are from Dalit and Adivasi communities. Rohit was one of the few who made it to higher education, yet he was killed by the deep-rooted hateful discrimination. There is an argument that no country for Dalit and Adivasi children. How do you respond to this narrative, and how can this problem be solved?
Yeah, I agree entirely that there has been discrimination of children on the basis of caste and tribe in the country, and that the education system has just not known how to address children from Dalit and Adivasi communities. I mean, it is a malaise, it's a shameful aspect of India's education system and Indian society as well. There, at the same time, I don't think this will continue for good. There are many voices that are coming up. It's no more like it was, say, earlier, that people will shut up. There are Dalit voices, Dalit groups. There are others also who are strong supporters of Dalit movements, who will not accept injustice to Dalits, tolerate this injustice. And I do hope all of us gather together for education for the Dalit and Adivasi. Having said this, let me tell you that we have to embed this fight also in the fight for universality of children's rights. When we talk about Dalit and Adivasi children, we talk about social justice for Dalit and Adivasi children. But if we talk exclusively only about Dalit and Adivasi children, without talking about the universality of the rights of children, then I think it will deepen exclusionary barriers. I'm talking about, I have to elaborate on it, there is no time. So I would say that we embed the fight for the Adivasi and Dalit children in the framework of universality of rights, just to avoid further exclusionary barriers and further deepening of polarization of children, uh, uh, which is so convenient for those in power.
There is another question asked by Pritish. He is working with me. He is a PhD scholar. He is asking why there is no protection for children who are getting victimized of IPC 498A due to family disputes.
I think there are many, many court cases that this, I will not be able to answer this question because it's completely different from the kind of framework that we are talking about. The family law, dispute, dowry, it's completely, totally a different subject. But there are many, many cases of this in the family courts. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm no position to take up this topic.
Okay, so I think that's it. I think there is no more questions. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
You have almost answered all the questions. Now I request my MPhil student Sanjay Meher to provide a vote of thanks to our speaker.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to one and all present here. Respected keynote speaker, Professor Shanta Sinha, Madam, from Hyderabad Central University. Convener of this webinar, Dr. Himanshu Sekhar Mishra, sir. Respected Professor Vishnu Chaudhary, sir. Gitanjali Das, Madam. Arun Patnaik, sir. And Dr. Rajashree Padi, Madam. It's really a great pleasure for me to propose a vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to give my hearty thanks and sincere gratitude to Professor Shanta Sinha, Madam, for making an excellent presentation on child rights. Madam has rightly stressed and talked about rights. Rights should be based on universality, equality, liberty, and social justice. Then he talked about talks about child rights. Child rights are entitlement, should be available to every children. Then he told that we should change our tradition for the sake of child, to save the intrinsic value of the child. Democracy should be reach out to the last person. It be inclusive, and it is the duty of the state to protect and to provide the basic needs to a children, to a child. Sorry, and child poverty is an obstacle to equal opportunity. Child poverty is an aspect of child impoverishment. Uh, Actually, the point which I like most is children play very important role in transforming society. So states should provide all the basic needs to a child. So it was indeed a very uh, excellent presentation by madam. We are really grateful to you, madam, uh, to for providing your valuable time. Then I would thanks to Professor Vishnu Chaudhary sir, Gitanjali Das madam, and Rajeshri Pari madam for attending this webinar. Then I would especially thanks to convener of this webinar, Dr. Mishra sir, for organizing such excellent webinar for us. Then I'm happy to express a vote of thanks to all the participants. They are instead of using Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, they are joining us and enjoying this webinar. It's a really learning platform for everybody. So I would like to thank everybody for making this webinar a great resounding success. Thank you all. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
So thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for your vote of thanks.
Yeah.
So, madam,
Thank
on
you.
behalf of all, I'm grateful to you. So
Thank you.
I hope that your presence with us will give us a academic boosting, so that we should not lose our hope. There are many possibilities if we will be honest to our education or research. I think the time will come when education and research that will be honest to us. So we should not lose our hope. Academicians like you are with us, and only thing we should do that we should work and work.
Correct.
And there is a result, right? So thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Namaste, madam.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a
So
lot.
I'm
I'm
stopping
trying
the
to
recording.
get out of it. I'm seeing how to leave here.